understanding donor motivations at all income levels. Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the fundraising school, and it's my delight to welcome Dr. Otis Fulton. He's the Vice President of Psychological Strategies for Turnkey, a national fundraising consulting firm that is helping nonprofits understand their donors. And Otis, thanks so much for being with us on the Fundraising Schools podcast.
Oh, great to be with you, Bill.
You are a social psychologist, and you have taken that expertise to help us understand donor motivations. What led you into this work?
Well, I got into it the typical way. I was on a Match.com date with a woman that became my wife, Katrina Van Huss. I was a lobbyist for the education industry for many years and worked with state governments and the federal government. And she started out as a client, actually, before we got married. And all my other clients fell away, and my education clients, and I was left with this, and it's just been a great match with I am so happy that I'm in the nonprofit world. It's so much more fulfilling than anything that I've done as a lobbyist. So it's been a great 10 years.
And you and Katrina are having such a great impact through Turnkey on nonprofits across the United States. And with your scientific expertise, psychology, part of the study is motivation. Why do people do things? Why do they choose things? And you have applied that to charitable giving. What are some of the big themes that have stood out for you as you've looked at donor motivation, including across the different economic spectrum?
Sure. Well, I think that people tend to believe that it's all about the mission, where it's really all about the donor. It's really what participating in the nonprofit world does for the donor. There's research that says that people who participate in two or more nonprofits at the same time actually have a better life expectancy. So this is something that is very, very rewarding to people. And what my work focuses on is really approaching supporters and so forth, and giving them the kind of experience that makes them want to remain to be engaged with a nonprofit.
Your colleagues who took economics would say charitable giving is a highly irrational act because they're giving away some of their money. But you see other things at play with your work in psychology. What are you seeing there in terms of donors and their motivations?
Well, people are highly irrational. I think that the problem that economists make is that they look at the individual as their unit of observation, so to speak. People have evolved to succeed in groups. And so people are very finely attuned to the well-being of their group and where they are in relation to their group. And contributing to the group is one way to maintain their status within their group. And people find, again, this very, very highly rewarding.
So when we talk about groups, we'll borrow from the economists just one more time. They often break the economy up into quintiles, right, in terms of people's incomes and people's wealth. And I know as you've applied your work in social psychology to donor motivation, you might be seeing some differences along the economic spectrum and how fundraisers are interacting with folks, depending on where they are on the economic spectrum. What are you finding there, Otis?
Well, let me just make a blanket statement. I believe that income inequality is absolutely a cancer growing on our society. And, there's been recent studies that have shown that perhaps the small dollar donor is in decline in the United States. And I believe this is one of the symptoms of income inequality. And, there's been a lot of economic data that says that for the last 30 or 40 years, the middle class and the lower class, their income has been relatively static. It really hasn't gone up or down. The problem is that the upper end of the economic spectrum, the high earners, have just exploded. And so here's where the social psychology comes in. People don't look at their situation and gauge their affluence in terms of absolute dollars. It's always a social comparison to others. So as people see the incomes of others running away, it makes them feel poor. And I really believe that we're starting to see that now in terms of nonprofits, that people feel poor, and when people feel poor, they have all kinds of negative outcomes. One of them being they tend not to give their monies to great things like charities.
So, Otis, then another aspect of this is the motivation of the fundraiser. Is the fundraiser viewing them as poor and not even asking? I mean, that's a question we've talked about on this podcast quite a bit with some others, that when we hear that only 50% of households donate, are the other 50% being asked and saying no? Or are fundraisers not asking them because they think, oh, they're at the kind of lower rungs of the economic ladder, so I'm not going to go there? What do you think?
Well, people, there's been longstanding data that says that people who are lower on the economic scale give a higher proportion of their income away than people on the upper end of their of the economic scale. So, yeah, I think that fundraisers are making a mistake by not going to these people. And again, I look at the nonprofit world as an opportunity for people to have some of the most fulfilling experiences that they can have in their lifetimes. So, I think that we're really doing them a disservice by not inviting them to participate in these great missions and so forth that you see throughout the charity world.
Can you give us some examples from your work? And I know you might want to just kind of scrub for names and kind of leave this more anonymous in the nonprofits that you work with at Turnkey. But have you seen this in terms of, have you worked with nonprofits? They talk about, well, we're just focusing on the top of the gift range chart, the middle of the gift range chart. And even with the income inequality problem that you cited, that you're helping them find ways to be more inclusive across the economic spectrum. Are there any practical examples you can give for fundraisers that they could apply at their nonprofits?
Oh, absolutely. My wife, Katrina, and I have written 2 books on peer-to-peer fundraising. And, the great thing about peer-to-peer is, sometimes it's called the front door of the nonprofit. And that means, you get somebody in to do an event. Maybe it's a bike riding event, maybe it's a walking event or whatever. And that's how they're introduced to the nonprofit. Most big dollar donors, most major donors start out as small dollar donors. So it gives people an opportunity to kind of kick the tires of the nonprofit, to see what's happening with the mission, to talk to people that are affected perhaps, and to talk to other people who are involved in the mission, get their stories, form some relationships and so forth. So yeah, it's I'm a big believer in a big funnel, and that's what we preach to our clients.
And those fundraisers, Otis, are under so much pressure. I'm sure you've seen it, for ROI, right? Return on investment. And we teach ROI at the fundraising school. Fundraising is a management process. We need to manage our fundraising, but an exclusive focus solely on ROI will take us only to the top of the gift range chart, right? Do you see that in your work in terms of folks wanting to just, raise the most dollars from the smallest number of people so that they can move on? What are you seeing as you're working across the country?
Sure. We preach lifetime value. That is the really the only measure that should be looked at. ROI is kind of in the for-profit world. It's kind of what we're doing this quarter. It's not a big picture kind of an idea. So we preach, just look at the lifetime value of a donor. It's much easier to retain someone than it is to acquire them. And I think when you get into ROI, you're looking at folks who want to bring more people in. We really focus on getting people to retain their donors so that they're in there for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and they're having a great experience the whole time.
Agreed. Consistent with our teaching at the fundraising school. Yes, manage with ROI, but like anything else, it has its shadow side if it's used improperly. I'm going to take you back to your psychology and motivation, and you touched on this a little bit. At the fundraising school, our definition is that fundraising is the gentle art of teaching the joy of giving. Why would we not let anybody experience the joy of giving? And Otis, just as we talk about ensuring that we are fundraising across the economic spectrum, knowing even with this challenge of income inequality in the United States, challenges that some of our neighbors have economically. Can you just talk about, again, how the donor benefits when donating, and how that alone should inspire all fundraisers to make sure we're being highly inclusive, regardless of anybody's economic background when fundraising?
Sure. People want to seek out others who share their values and their ideas. And so, they look to organizations and so forth. And one of the main ways that people define their identities, psychologists call these their social identities, is by the kinds of people and groups that they associate with. And so, let's say that I'm a member. I'm a monthly donor to the Richmond SPCA, which is a nonprofit kill center here, a non-kill center here in Richmond, Virginia, where I live. And I'm a big animal rights person. I do things like I support free-range turkeys, and then I still use I still have a Thanksgiving turkey, which my wife says is completely irrational, but and of course it is. But you engage with folks who have similar values and so forth, and you enter what psychologists call a social validation feedback loop. So you're communicating with other folks like yourself, and they're telling you, yeah, you're right. It is important and so forth. So that good experience makes it more likely that you're going to continue to engage with them, and the wheel goes round and round. And so, that's the kind of thing when people get involved in nonprofits and it's a good fit for them. They feel very validated, and being validated is very, very psychologically motivating. So that's the kind of experience that keeps a person engaged with a nonprofit. And so those are the kinds of things that you really want to look for. There's a book. Let me think if I can. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's the history of social media. And it talks about how platforms like Facebook use this social validation feedback loop to keep people on their site, because they found it's really almost addictive to have your sense of identity validated on their platform. And of course, the longer you stay on the platform, the more ads they can cite you. So that's kind of a negative example of social validation feedback loop use.
Social validation feedback. I am motivated. I have values. There are passions, things I care about. And I find other people who feel the same way that I do. I'm able to join them. I can do something by myself. We can do even more together. And that's something, Otis, fundraisers are inviting people into. They're not asking them for a financial transaction. Oh, no. It's that transformational relationship aimed towards that cause that we can believe in together. And while we do, we enjoy that social validation and that joy of giving.
Absolutely. And, I mentioned that I consider myself to be an animal rights advocate. That's part of my identity. When people see themselves as having these kinds of social identities, they're looking for ways to use their money to make things happen. So, this is exactly the kind of situation that you want to set up with people.
Dr. Otis Fulton of Turnkey, which he works in alongside his wife, Katrina Van Huss, as they're helping nonprofits across the United States with their fundraising solutions. And Otis, you mentioned that you and Katrina have co-authored a couple of books. Our audience might want to look and find those. What are they?
Sure. 2017, we wrote a book called Dollar Dash. And this last year in 2023, we came out with kind of an updated version of that, but it has a lot of new material called Social Fundraising. So, peer-to-peer fundraising is a very social behavior. And so we call peer-to-peer now social fundraising, because it happens in a lot of different ways in a lot of different places. It's not just a one-to-one interaction like it used to be.
As people are pursuing social validation. Kind of nice how it all comes together, right?
It does. Indeed, it does.
Dr. Otis Fulton joining us from Turnkey on this podcast from the Fundraising School, where you can learn about donor motivations and across all economic classes and discuss these issues and how people are expressing their values and their philanthropic motivations in 22 public courses that lead to 4 different certificates. We can bring any of this content right to you, your nonprofit, your association, your region, whatever works best for you in the United States and around the world. We can teach in person or online. We have our quarterly webinars. We have these podcasts. And of course, our knowledge is contained in our updated textbook, Achieving Excellence in Fundraising, now out in its 5th edition. Our website is philanthropy.iupui.edu/the fundraising school. Our producers today are Jennifer Boffman and Mike Anthony. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, and now you are now more fully informed on this first day from the fundraising school.